You already know me. You already know my deal. We're in a sprint draft right now. We start off with CeeDee Lamb at pick 3. And usually, I'd be taking that angle into who we just saw go off the board, Ladd McConkey. However, I'm going to let this draft come to me a little bit more. There's been very few drafts where I start off taking CD and then heavily play into some other team, matchups, whatever have you for this sprint contest, and I do think there's a lot of value in doing that, especially, add a little bit more to my CeeDee Lamb profile here in the sprint. So we went with Chase Brown at our second pick. Gonna let this speak to me a little bit more here at 27. But given we can go Chase Brown into T. Higgins and then take Burrow, have a great Cincinnati stack, those matchups are ones that are fairly hard to get into later. Cincinnati plays into Baltimore, Miami, Arizona, so it does make it a little bit more difficult. We will be able to get some bringbacks, but I do think having this Cincinnati-heavy, Cincinnati-focused team with CeeDee Lamb at the front end can be very beneficial. Obviously, we are going to have some bye week issues on week 10, but we'll be able to figure that out with the more depth that we accumulate later. Very happy with how this one has started off so far. We'll see how we can hyper-stack into Cincinnati. We still may do a couple of bringbacks for CD, but I think the main thing I want to do here is demonstrate how you can kind of focus off the initial matchups with your first overall pick, especially when it's very tempting to do so with CeeDee Lamb, and give yourself some exposure to Lamb without hyper-fixating on Dallas or their matchups. So we'll be back in the next one, hopefully get some Cincinnati-favored items later. All right, 46. I mean, if you're going to give me the Dallas double with a little bit of value, I might have to do it. Screw it. I mean, this is not what I intended to do, but getting a double with Cincinnati and Dallas is certainly something people aren't going to be doing a lot because look at where it leaves us on by week 10. But given that, Micah Parsons is officially out of town, this offense is going to have to score a little bit more to get the win total that Jerry and all the Dallas Cowboy fans are expecting and need. Not what I was planning, but it looks like it's what we're going to do. And then we will take Burrow at 51, get our double for Burrow through Brown and Higgins. And I guess, we can consider Dak. I don't think it's going to happen given the bye week problems that it's going to create and the disparity at quarterback versus some other positional values depth-wise. But, doing the double into Dallas isn't that bad of an option here. It's just, can we make up the depth later? It's certainly a high ceiling play that can pay off for us in spades should these be two of the highest scoring offenses this upcoming season, which is certainly within the realm of possibility. With this next pick, we're going to go a little bit off the wall, but it does, give us some potential work into a few other matchups. I do like Matthew Golden a fair bit with the injuries that we've currently seen to the Green Bay Packers wide receiver room. I think the fracture to Jaden Reed is pretty significant, and Reed was a player that I really liked earlier in the offseason. Apologies for that ding there, but the short of it, Jaden Reed, I worry about a lot of consistency from him with a fracture in his foot playing through that most of the season. I don't think Dontavian Wicks is a major threat, and while this offense won't have to score as much with the addition of Micah Parsons, there's a ton of opportunity for Golden to become the very apparent one, especially after the Packers invested first-round capital into him. And with Green Bay, we have some potential to work into Baltimore twice with Cincinnati and Green Bay now across that matchup, and there are some later Baltimore people that I do like a fair bit. Minnesota also plays well into Dallas. I do think Addison's, pretty great option. With only 3 weeks on suspension, the guaranteed timeline. People are worried about a ramp-up, given that they're going to be playing some foreign games right after his end of his suspension. I'm not too worried about that. The reality is I trust Kevin O'Connor's offense a fair bit and feel very confident with these wide receivers set up now. Addison especially stepping up in our heavily weak by week 10, or just week of 10, I guess. I think Addison's a great value pick given the supporting cast we have to support through his first 3 weeks not on the field, him able to step up when we need him most at week 10 and hopefully provide enough value to season long get us to this 3-week sprint and take advantage of it ceiling-wise with the stacking that we've done into Cincinnati and Dallas and hopefully a couple of bringbacks later on. Here at pick 94, I understand a lot of the trepidation that most people will have with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt. At the end of the day, the reality is that most of the time, public ADP is fairly correct. I get that a lot of people don't want to be like, yeah, let me invest top 100 now, draft capital, into a 7th round pick on the Washington Commanders, especially with the existence of Austin Eckler, who, while last season he did not do what he once did with the Chargers, is enough of a threat to cause significant concern for people drafting him. The reality is that especially in the recent NFL memory, a 7th round pick coming into a now very muddled, unknown backfield. Let's finish up this next pick before I continue this. I don't love ETN, but it would give us a double, and we just pretty much need to get some more running back depth. So while I don't love ETN, I think he's a fine pick. Certainly has the upside if he's the 1A of what might be a 1A, 1B, 1C backfield. But what you can guarantee with ETN is that he's going to be the pass-catching back. We saw, even in the worst-case scenario for a pass-catching back in the Liam Cohen offense, that being Rashad White this past season, he still provided solid, high-end RB2 value, which in best ball can provide a little bit of spike weeks. If there is any injury to his running mates in the Jags room, ETN should see a massive bump, which can be perfect for us given this running back needy roster. Back to JCM, or Bill, which apparently he likes to go by. In recent NFL memory, we saw Isaiah Pacheco come into Kansas City running back room that nobody knew who was going to be the starter. It was an open room, and while there were some people that we had known, had serviced well previously, he came in, people bought in once they got the hype, and it paid off for them in Pacheco's rookie season. Back when that happened, people seemed to care a lot less, simply because we had seen Andy Reid do this prior. And while I haven't seen much of that conversation in the Commanders' case, I think people are forgetting that Isaiah Pacheco did this very recently. Like, it's not insane for even a 7th-round running back to come in, take over a large volume of snaps, and provide immediate fantasy value for you and your roster. The other benefit with Washington is they do play into this Dallas double we have Week 17, and they're going to be a very high-scoring offense. Yes, JCM may not get the receiving workload that ETN and his running mate, Austin Eckler, are going to get, but he's going to be, at least by all reports, the lead back in a very high-scoring offense, which is value. It plainly, bluntly is. I understand that you may worry about the floor, the worst case scenario, but especially in a best ball format where you are trying to place top 5, top 10, 1. That's where you get the real value, not getting your $20 back on this draft and spending all this time doing multiple drafts. You want a high placement, and JCM brings you the ceiling for a high placement. See how this next pick goes. Since we have Golden and we aren't going to hyper stack into Green Bay, I don't think. I doubt we take Reed. There is some value. I do feel like a lot of the Reed here might just still be an adjustment period, partially hampered by a decrease in drafts right before the season. I don't really know how much volume, especially the sprint, is seeing, so I do worry about that. I would have loved Bateman. Would have got us a little bit of Baltimore there. Since we have Addison, and I already like J.J. McCarthy, we do now know that we have at least one matchup for him. Could maybe get a Giant or some other things later. I do like him a lot more than Herbert, given the injury to Rashawn Slater. Yes, I could have waited, but I don't really care too much about Reed versus Burden versus anything else. We're going to more so want a running back here. I doubt that the 3 top running backs go, but they certainly could. Could also take Eckler and just fully commit into high-scoring offense, whichever running back goes best fits. But I'm confident that KOC can keep McCarthy very fantasy relevant, even though there are some concerns, and given that we have the stack with Addison now, feel fairly good about that. And the play into Dallas, of course, as well, Week 15. Running back decision is now here. I don't think we want to go Javonte Williams, even though I have drafted him a fair bit. I honestly don't think it's the worst decision to just say, hey, give me the entirety of the Commanders' running back room. That's not bad at all. It's worked out previously. If you think back to, granted, it was a cheaper cost, I believe, when this happened, but you think back to a Chain and Mostert, that worked out amazing for drafters in that period. It was another, murky backfield in a high-scoring offense. Both these running backs can provide value. You don't need now merit to do it all. You can just take, the full running back room value in a high-scoring offense and let the ceiling on this lineup be contingent on Joe Burrow and the Bengals playing well, potentially a Jamar Chase dip to the benefit of Brown and Higgins. When you're getting drafted 1 overall, we've seen that happen plenty of times. So call it the number 1 overall curse, whatever it is. That's happened before. And, the double in Dallas, admittedly without Dak, but it's not the worst thing ever. I do think the rest of this lineup can make up that ceiling, even though I did just discuss how great JCM's ceiling is. There's nothing that says you can't do this and have it provide a ton of value, especially on an extremely high-scoring offense with Jaden Daniels at the helm. I think Benson is a great easy pick here. We now get that matchup with Cincinnati against Arizona Week 17, which is great for us, considering the double that we have, and Benson is a very premium handcuff. James Conner has been healthy this past season, but he's shown in the past that he can miss a couple games here and there. This isn't a bet on a season-ending injury for James Conner, something I especially don't want. I love James Conner, not just as a player, as a person. He's a pick guy, beat cancer, easy player to root for, all the time, anytime. So no ill will towards James Conner, but Benson, in the event of any short game stretch where Conner is out, it's great. Should be another, above average offense. You have Kyler Murray at the home, should be good. And Benson is expected to, even in the event of no injury to James Conner, take some more snaps, some more carries, some more touches this season for the Cardinals. With this second pick, I'm honestly just going to, I think, take the step up. Yeah, with no Denver to justify Hollywood Brown, I think it's fairly easy to just go Dobbs here. I mentioned earlier how I think the injuries to Green Bay's offense present a lot of opportunity for Matthew Golden. I think it's that same thing with Romeo Dobbs. And I think Dobbs is the one that can potentially a lot easier exceed ADP, where he's currently at. 150 is pretty much next to nothing. And if he's, more generally the two because of Reed's injury, if at a couple weeks into the season Reed is like, yeah, I just can't play on this, you're going to see Dobbs vastly outperform ADP. It will be fairly inconsistent. That's been a lot of the problem with a lot of Green Bay Packers receivers, is since the ball is shared around so much, it's hard to know when to start them, but you avoid all of that in best ball. So I love Dobbs here, and it's never bad to double stack into a team that you like. I think the Packers will be very good this season. Passing offense, maybe not as much with Parsons, but there's certainly a lot of positivity out of Green Bay. Jordan Love, it was a non-throwing hand injury to his hand, so no worries there either. I don't know why Ray Davis is falling, but I'm not going to pass on the value. It'll be our last running back. That does mean we position out of Justice Hill, Keaton Mitchell, Jalen Wright. Not the worst thing, not the best thing, but I just think that Ray Davis is great. I mean, we talked about handcuffs with Trey Benson. If James Cook misses any time, Ray Davis is another premier, weekly ceiling. I think he's very good. I think he has the great standalone value, being more likely to be the goal line back, even with the James Cook contract extension. I do believe Davis will get a fair amount of work. I also do think, kind of reverse logic here, the thing that you might not expect. Now that the Bills have Cook for an extended period of time, they're not going to give him insane workload this season. They do want to keep him healthy for the extension period that they've signed him to. And I do think Ray Davis occasionally spelling him, particularly around the goal line, a little bit more rough and tumble work, is something they'll be interested in. Next pick, Isaiah Likely. I think especially for this lineup, where we now have two high-profile games for Baltimore, those being Cincinnati 15 and Green Bay 17, Likely provides a ton of ceiling, and then we can work out, because of his injury, because of the role concerns, him and Andrews shift around a lot. Likely's not a super consistent option week to week, but he provides the ceiling that we really want in our tight end room, especially given the ADP investment, or lack thereof, I guess, in our tight end room. We can work out the floor for this room later. Ertz, certainly an option there. If Hunter Henry was there, I may have taken him over Ray Davis, simply because he gives us a third matchup for Likely to play into, and I think Likely's really going to give you that value over that 3-week stretch, that increased ceiling for a player like him, as opposed to being someone that really pushes you into that 3-week playoff. So we'll get some players that hopefully give us the floor to get there. And another note just for Ertz, people like Ertz. There's no reason not to like him. He does play into Dallas for us, but the season-long difference between Zach Ertz and Cade Otton is not much of anything. So I really do think, once you're in this range, don't be too concerned unless you have Giants, Eagles, and Dallas, and you're like, yeah, we're fully in on stacking into Washington for their games. Don't stress too much about tight ends. It's you're either gonna roll the dice and hit on someone crazy, which is a very low percentage outcome, or what's more likely, you pass, get a much later tight end, and they do essentially the same thing. I'm definitely a fan of going 3 tight end, making up that volume, that production through the mean, rather than taking 2 middle round tight ends like Njoku and Loveland. While I do like those players individually, I'm definitely in my heart of hearts a late 3 tight end guy. I'm happy to take Johnson here. You can see Hopkins and Wilson there as potential options to play into some other things. In my opinion, I think Johnson maintains a similar, role production to DeAndre Hopkins, a similar ceiling. I do think Johnson maybe has a little bit more. I think Hopkins is pure TD dependent upside. Johnson, if he, maintains a larger role over Trey Harris, at least in this first season, if, he's able to be that established deep threat that I do think he still has the potential to be, I think he's likely, going to outperform Hopkins, at least from a ceiling perspective there. Let's clear up this. Even though, I am worried about Gesicki. Should return soon 13 days ago. We are going to need him to play a lot sooner rather than later with Likely already injured, but I am confident if we can get Juwan Johnson to the next pick, I'll feel fairly comfortable about that tight end room. Back to Quentin Johnston. This wide receiver room, I think, is more open-ended than people expect. I personally believe that, obviously the arrival of Trey Harris through the draft, the signing of Keenan Allen back to the roster, are concerning for Quentin Johnston's fantasy outlook, both in the short and long term. But, at pick 190, that's priced in. If Johnson is able to hold a higher enough piece in the depth chart, a piece, at least in his profile, that shouldn't much be affected by Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen is going to be more so slot, maybe allowing them to move Ladd McConkey out of the slot more, put him on the outside, potentially create some mismatches there, move him around. Johnson's still going to be a valued deep threat. I do think Herbert is a great quarterback that can still support Quentin Johnston, giving us a random spike week based on a long TD, based on his deep threat ability. And with our last wide receiver, that's a perfect option when we play into Dallas very well for their Week 16 matchup. And we do get Juwan Johnson there. For his individual profile, I do think, you can see some of the consistency these past 3 years. Obviously, 80 points isn't great, but when you have 3 tight ends and play in a best ball format, it's very good. I do think you can count on Juwan Johnson, especially in this late range, to be a decent volume tight end. Even amidst what is scoping out to be a very poor quarterback situation in New Orleans, Juwan Johnson should be a target that either quarterback, whether that be Rattler or Shuck, can target especially when the pocket breaks down. Like, if we see Kamara, again, trail off towards the end of the season like he has in the past years, I think Juwan Johnson can be a very safe, easy target. He's not going to, again, kind of the inverse of likely. He's not going to be someone that I think wins you the sprint, but I think he's a valuable option to actually get you to the 3-game playoff. And that's it for this draft. It's one I honestly, I like how it came out a lot. This is a great team. Hopefully this will be one we can revisit much later in the season, review its performance. But until then, I will be back tomorrow for our final draft. We'll end with a big one tomorrow. It'll be a $100 DraftKings draft, so hopefully you'll join me tomorrow for that great one. Until then, draft well, stay safe. Peace!